This week's movie is Dumb Money,
Yes.
which was Nicholas's young pick.
No, it's my pick.
Or
Josh's.
your
This
pick.
is my pick. Yeah.
That's right. It was your pick.
Yeah.
And it's on Netflix.
Yes. This is, I mean, it's about a very, very recent event in the world, where it's the end of 2020 into early 2021, and the GameStop stock story, if you will, from just over 3 years ago now. It's based off of that. So it's interesting because it's obviously based on a true story. This man named Keith Gill, and how he posted all these videos and comments onto a Reddit page called Wall Street Bets, where they increased, a bunch of people essentially increased the stock price of GameStop. What's the thing that they're trying to
short?
So they're
short selling.
Yeah, and so this is happening, and they're doing it via the Robinhood app, and suddenly the price of this thing is climbing and climbing and climbing, and the rich people are getting very, very angry. I feel like of all the COVID things that happened, this is the one that, like, it feels like a fever dream, because it's like the very end again of 2020. I still remember this vaguely, but more just like, that's so weird, because this was also when like NFTs suddenly became a thing,
right.
And obviously, speaking of dumb money, all that stuff. The shots weren't really available just yet. Just a very weird time in the world history and in America's history. So that is what Dumb Money is. I guess the thing that I thought as I'm watching this was, it's just so soon to make this movie. I enjoyed it. I thought it was a fun watch, but it's also just like, man, this story isn't even that old. It's just, I don't know, weird how fast we kind of turn things around these days.
Yeah, well, this was adapted from a book that two Wall Street Journal's reporters somehow managed to get out by the end of 2021, because they shot this in 2022 and it was out last year.
Yep.
It was out when the movie still hadn't really come back yet from the pandemic. So it's astounding how fast it went. Part of that, though, that makes it, I think, really an interesting film that's going to have some resonance regardless of its specific content years from now, is it's pretty factual, to the point where they put in the actual footage of like the congressional hearing. And I remember Stephen Colbert doing his show from his house. Well,
I had forgotten about that, and then they showed that clip, and I'm like, oh, that's right, they were doing their shows from their homes for a while.
Stuff like that's in the movie, and they were skillful enough in making the movie that makes it feel like the actors were really in the news situation, right? And it shows something about COVID that you don't notice, or at least I didn't notice the first time I watched it, but I sure noticed it this time. Very few of the characters ever meet each other.
You're right. Yeah, it's all happening over the internet.
It's all over the internet, and the ones that do come together, it's Gil and his wife and the little kid. It's the lesbian college
family.
Yeah, basically just his family.
It's just these little groups, right? And the third thing that lets me know that it hit right is the real whatever is. I got your phone, boys. That was my phone.
Man, that was so dramatic, because when you said it, I thought you were actually playing a sound effect for us. I'm like, where did this sound?
That were my phone. And I lost my what little train of thought there was. Oh, I know what it was. One of the guy who, I believe it's the one that Vincent D'Onofrio played, but one of those hedge fund managers, no, it's Nick Offerman's, the guy he played, is still thinking about suing the movie.
Really?
Yeah. And I'm sure he got told,
Because of his portrayal of him,
Yep.
or
Because it made him look so awful. Yeah.
Yeah, of all the characters, he definitely seems to be like the biggest monster of the three rich guys. Because one of them is the Mets owner, right? That's the Vincent D'Onofrio character. That's the right, aren't I correct on this one? Okay, yeah.
Yep.
Yes, he's the Mets owner. That's Stephen Cohen.
Yep.
And then Seth Rogen, Gabe Plotkin, and then that other guy. So yeah, I thought that the Nick Offerman character was definitely the worst of those guys.
And Cohen doesn't like it either, which tells me they hit pretty close. They hit too close to home for these guys, right?
Mm-hmm.
The other thing, I think part of the reason it was able to be made so fast is also there was literally nothing else going on, right, in the movie business. And
That's
this
true.
was a movie because you don't have all the characters together, you could shoot quickly and in a more or less isolated fashion, right?
Because you're not having to herd a bunch of cats, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's usually just one or two people in the same room. Everyone else is kind of doing an isolated thing. I mean, it's not like you're having to really, get a lot of people together and go through a lot of different takes. You can just roll right through
they
it.
filmed it. It says on Wikipedia, October to November of 2022. So, and how many of those scenes was it just somebody pretending to talk into the phone or talk onto the computer?
Talk onto the computer. Exactly.
A lot of those scenes in the same places too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Half the movie he's talking to his computer.
Exactly.
That is true. Was it important, Kent, to be because of the potential for lawsuit, important to stick as close to the story? Because we see it so often in movies that are based on real life that, they embellish a lot of things, or they maybe conflate 3 or 4 things together into one act to just move the story along. But was it more important to stay as true as possible so that in the event that someone did want to see, you can say, hey, wait a minute, this is what happened?
Well, I think that, and also because it happened so recently, people that followed it would know exactly what happened, right? And you're not going to watch that and have it end up some completely different way, or turn these, you could have turned Gil, was that his last name?
Mm-hmm.
Character into a real caricature, right? But instead, he does a good job of acting with him, and you could still go watch his videos, and it's not that much different. I mean, it's played a little more comedically and blah, 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 but he's still kind of reflecting the real guy who did this in real time, in time that we can sit here and look back at right now, right? And remember a lot of it, right? I remember when this was going on.
Kate, you said something earlier that reminded me another one of my takeaways. And that was just like, I think that this is a really good pandemic movie in the sense that, I mean, it's not that long ago, but there were a lot of things that I just kind of forgot about, maybe the day-to-day of it all, that this movie, I think, captures very, very well. Exactly. Very, very well. Like, one of the things that I think I remember more from the era is like how some people, they'd have the mask on, but their nose would just be showing a little bit, or whatever. And like the dialogue between the GameStop employee and his boss, I thought that was just, it was very real to life, and just kind of how everyone was operating and everyone was kind of meandering through things on a daily basis. I thought that, and maybe it just helps too, that it was like the majority of this movie is set in the winter time. And that is, even though the majority of COVID was actually in the nicer weather that year, because it started in March in America, ramping up that way. I don't know. So I thought that it did a good job of representing America a few years ago at that exact moment.
I agree with that. And this doesn't have anything precisely to do with the pandemic. The other thing that this movie did that made it work is, if you remember The Big Short, which is probably the most comparable movie to this, in order for the audience to figure out what was going on, we had Margot Robbie in a bubble bath explaining how you short a stock, basically.
Right.
Right? This one, you didn't have to know all that stuff. They get a lot of it across, at a level that you don't have to know the detail to get what's really going on. And I thought that was, and I don't know if it was in the writing or the direction or what, but that was pretty masterful.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was. And, and I actually went back in and read a little bit more about it because, I'm not a man of the stock market. I vaguely remember this story happening. I remember hearing about GameStop, but it was kind of in one ear, out one for me when it was actually happening. So this was kind of good to kind of catch me up on, oh, this is what they were trying to accomplish. And here were the major players involved. And so I think from that aspect, that was why it was entertaining to me. It wasn't a lot of laugh out loud parts. I mean, it was, yes, it is a lighthearted movie, but I wouldn't call it an all out comedy.
No, just moments that were funny more than it being a funny movie.
And it's more about just watching. And if you like to see the little guy take out the big guy, the arrogant rich people getting, theirs, this scratches that itch.
Definitely.
Oh, go ahead, Ken.
I was just going to say, we always talk about docudrama.
Mm-hmm.
This is kind of docu-comedy.
Yeah,
for sure.
And if you think about it, I mean, just the whole aspect of it is kind of silly in the first place. That was the one thing I remembered about the actual story when it was happening in real time was, man, this doesn't seem serious.
Yeah.
And I think it expresses that, through the way, these characters are played out. And, just the rapid fire going from one place to the other. Do we sell? Do we not sell? What do we hold? And
even there's a moment with Seth Rogen at one point, I don't know, maybe midway through the movie in terms of like the seriousness of it, where it's like, yeah, they're still doing it. And I think he's talking to the Cohen character and he's like, so you just bought a bunch of shares, didn't you? He goes, yeah, I just bought 600,000 shares or whatever. And so even they're thinking that this is a joke, even though he's going to take a large bath at the end of the movie.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. What did you think, Nick?
I remember most of this. Not as much anymore. I used to be very chronically online during COVID because what else was I going to do? I worked at the hardware store and then I would go home. I didn't interact with any of this because I've been on Reddit for a long time and the Wall Street Bets bros are the absolute worst part of Reddit that I never wanted to interact with. Like, I remember when Wall Street Bets got shut down and taken off of Reddit. That's when Reddit was kind of going through and cleaning up a bunch of stuff. And that part in the movie where they said it was banned for some of the inflammatory things that were said, like, that wasn't wrong. Like, that's probably not why they intended to, but some of the things that people would say on that forum, like some of the slang, it was real Wall Street bro-y. You got the crypto bros, you got the Wall Street bros, and that's where the Wall Street bros like to hang out. And the whole diamond hands thing, I hated that entire culture. So I just intentionally didn't want to get involved. So I would kind of keep up with it from a distance. I did have a few friends who were involved in this and who did very well from this. So I'm happy for them. And I remember at one point, I did decide, okay, fine, I'll download Robinhood. I'll check it out. And not too long after I downloaded Robinhood, this is when they shut down the option to buy.
When they got shut down, basically.
When they got shut down. But I got on late anyway. By the time I think I checked out the stock, it was already well in the hundreds. So I'm like, all right, I'm just not going to do this, but I'll follow along. So it was interesting to see this movie from this perspective. And because I didn't know how it necessarily started. I knew the general story, but I didn't know it was because of this one dude.
Yeah.
So it was kind of cool I was watching it from a distance and then I got kind of more
the origin story
about it.
I was just going to say, if people want to look and see what happens 99% of the time when a stock gets shorted, watch DJT Media. Stock, it got shorted big time, and it's lost 80% of its value, I believe it is, in a week and a half, 2 weeks. That's what happens when a stock gets shorted. Just like when the one of the girls in the movie, one of the two in the couple, were talking about how her dad worked forever at Shopko and got to be the manager of the store, and then the hedge funds came in, bled all the money out of it and shorted it and sent it to its death.
Right.
You know?
Couple comments that I wanted to get to because it led to, I would say, like maybe the best part of the movie. But Todd writes, I jumped on the Wall Street bets in January of 21. Profited nicely that year. Not a 2-comma return, but still nice. And I appreciated them showing that not all of them profited. The nurse seemed to ride it back down to a negative net worth. I thought there's that, towards the end of the movie, every time they're making a ton of money, you're just like, oh my gosh, cash out, cash out, cash out. And so when she is, where was she at? And she's following
Florida.
it. And she's like, this was just a lot higher or whatever. I'm just watching it like, oh my gosh, and I thought that was interesting that like this movie that at times is played for laughs and it's, about the little guy or whatever, that in that moment, I thought it was a pretty good, like tense, like what's going to happen here with these characters. So I thought that part of it was really interesting too.
Absolutely. And I think selling this is some kind of triumph of the underdog story. It may not really in the end be that, right? Because by the end, the big boys are back in control, right? But it's a great story of how the little guy got somewhere for a while.
Yeah. One of our listeners, Mustache Adam, he reached out and he says, years ago, my wife signed up for the Robinhood trading app. And when I signed up with her code, I got a free stock that I could monitor. I never touched it for years. And then I started to hear about the whole GameStop trading issue and how stock prices were being blown way out of proportion. I checked my Robinhood account and there it was. My free stock was GameStop. Cashed my stock out at a little over $400 for nothing. I remember Chance, one of our producers here, he got in on at the same time to AMC. It happened with AMC, and Chance got a few $100 for not really putting a whole lot in either. So it's cool that some people just got, a little bit of coin on the side.
Well, that is Dumb Money. It is on Netflix and a good hour and 45 minutes.
Yeah, I enjoyed it.
Yeah, it certainly very enjoyable.
I think Paul Dano is a really good actor. I think that, he was in, I don't remember how many movies we've done with him in them before, but he was in the Batman. He was the, the Riddler. That I think he plays a creep in a lot of movies really well. Like he's in There Will Be Blood. And he's a very interesting character in that. I think he's really good. And I think that I think Ken said it. He played this role pretty well.
He's also in The Fabelmans. He was good in that. And then he played the young Brian Wilson in Love and Mercy, that biopic. I mean, this guy's a skilled actor, and I thought he was very good. I thought America Ferrera, is that how you say her last name?
Yes. Yep.
The nurse, I thought she was excellent.
Yeah, me too.